Okay, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Cunningham Township Board for Monday, October 7th, 2019. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown.
Here.
Hayson.
Here.
Hersey.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts. Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Next up is approval of minutes from the September 3rd, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Moved by Jared.
Second.
Seconded by Sharice. Are there any corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? No additions. Is there anyone who wishes to address the Cunningham Town Board? I have cards from several individuals. I believe they're all for the City Council meeting. Okay. Committee to verify bills.
Waiting for the internet. Okay, so this last month, in terms of town board expenditures, we had, town fund expenditures, it's $79,513.89. In terms of general assistance expenditures, we had $61,723.46. And the total was $141,237.35. And you have a detailed report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Bill.
The town fund's quite a bit higher than usual. It looked like there were 3 pay periods this month. Is that right?
Let's see. For September, there may have been 3 pay periods in September.
Okay.
But most, let's see, I'm looking at supervisor. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to file those then?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the town fund, $79,513.89, and general assistance fund, $61,723.46.
Is there a second? Seconded by Sharice. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Reports of officers, quarterly financial report, and it looks like quality of housing.
Yeah, and I also believe that the assessor's office had a quick report as well. But I will start with the financial report, then we'll go to the assessor's report, and then we can come back to the housing quality. So first off, the general assistance participants are at 118. That's the same as last month. 31 of them are registered as homeless. We had 14 households served for rental assistance. That's also the same as last month. Interestingly, in both cases, like with general assistance, we had a number of people go off and new folks go on. So we were seeing, we're seeing a number, we've actually, and this is not surprising, in September we see a lot of people get income as the economy picks up. And then we see some folks coming onto the rolls. I did want to note with the households served in rental assistance, we had 5 move-in cases, 9 eviction prevention cases. That tends to be about the right scenario. About a fourth of the households served have housing subsidies. We're running a report actually on everyone we've served and to what extent they have subsidized housing. In some cases, this is because the households are homeless and they're moving into housing, and there is no tool to provide. They are required to do a full non-subsidized deposit. So say they are approved to move in and pay $75 a month in rent, and say their only income is the $265 they receive from our office, they're still required to put up the $650 or $700 for a deposit, which is onerous. So anyone who we're working with who's homeless, who's getting into housing, we essentially need to pay rental assistance. We do have an agreement with RPC where if someone is a general assistance participant, we do not do rental assistance as per our rules. So RPC covers the rental assistance for our participants, which is great. But we are in conversation with the Housing Authority to try to understand why we have such a high percentage of eviction prevention eviction cases in subsidized housing. So stay tuned. That's just one thing. We are partnering with the U of I Urban Planning faculty, Professor Cansalo, on a project that's to amplify the history and perspectives of homelessness in Champaign-Urbana. And we're planning an exhibit for the end of the semester, so I'll let you know when that's happening. But it'll probably be in one of the local venues, library, IMC, or someplace, to talk about kind of what homelessness looks like in Urbana. Our garden has an amazing bumper crop of tomatillos, also okra. Please come by and pick. We are planning a October Harvest Festival. Stay tuned for details, but it's tentatively October 26th. It'll be right after the Market in the Square, which I think is now called the Market in the Scare, for October 26th. So we're thinking about doing some kind of theme around how scary it is to try to get disability payments in this country. Anyway, stay tuned for details there. Is there any question about the memo? Otherwise, I'm going to turn to the financial report. Okay? Go ahead.
Last week, I had someone that lives on my ward, and she was calling for rental assistance. Well, she didn't know what to do. She was going to be evicted. Mm. And I referred her to your offices, and she was told that I guess she had used rental assistance before, so she couldn't use it. Could you just clarify
Absolutely.
for me how that goes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our countywide program is such, so our rules before we had a countywide program were you can only use it once every 2 years, which is very standard for townships' emergency assistance programs. Mm-hmm. So what we don't want to do is if you are regularly getting behind in rent, a one-time rental assistance payment is not really going to help you dig out of that hole. We're really looking to support people who have a one-time emergency, or family situation. We're able to help them. So we kind of set that constraint. If people do come to us and they've received rental assistance already, we do have housing advocacy, and in particular, we help people apply for subsidized housing, because if they're regularly getting behind in payments, they need to look at subsidies. Now, it takes a while to get unsubsidized housing, but we have mapped in intimate detail every single subsidized housing opportunity in the community. We know exactly what the parameters are, the eligibility criteria are, and we have property management names and contact numbers. And so in the past, I've found it very difficult to get in, to access some of the programs outside of the housing authority, and now we really have a whole map of that, and we have an advocate who specifically works with people to apply for those opportunities. So that individual, if they weren't able to get rental assistance again, would most likely have been referred to our advocate. Now, it's their choice whether or not to go in that direction, and some people choose not to, but that's the other tool
I don't
we
know
have.
if she did. I ended up getting a list of churches or something that would help her pay her rent.
Yep.
And calling her back for that. I don't know if she chose to take advantage of, because I didn't know everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would in those situations, and I can send you all a flyer we created about LIHEAP. LIHEAP is now open for seniors and disabled residents. Mm-hmm. It helps to pay utility bills. It's available through RPC. And on November 1st, it opens for families with small children, and then December 1st, it will open for everyone. So folks who are regularly getting behind, it's usually an issue of both rent and utilities, because utilities are very expensive. And so sometimes that can really help if they get access to LIHEAP to keep them from getting behind in rent. So I would always, I can send that out to town board members and anyone who you know who's trying to access that. They're always welcome to call our office,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also give them that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay. So next up, we have the financial report. Ms. Williams. Yeah, William will speak to any questions you have about the assessors. I can speak to questions you have about the supervisor. What I've done, which is what I've always done is to create a notes section that basically explains, anytime we've gone over, say, 25 to 30%, I give that explanation. In the printed version I have here, I don't see that, but in the one that I sent out, it was present. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, essentially, our situation is, for our side, is that we are seeing overage in terms of general assistance and transportation assistance. It's slight, but something I want to watch. Overall, we've seen we're under in terms of our budget, and we're under overall in terms of the budget for the township, I think. So essentially, the things that we're watching is office supply use and our programmatic expenses. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Eric?
So, summary of what you just said is we're solvent for the foreseeable future.
Exactly.
Okay. Do we have an assessor's report?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, it's actually on a thumb drive. Can everybody see that?
You're up.
Hello. As some of you may know, we went to the International Assessing Officers Conference in Niagara Falls, Canada. So this is just kind of a summary of some of the things I picked up. Not a total of them, but a summary of them. Okay, an overview. What is the IAAO? It's an organization of assessing officers. It's an international organization, so it's not just the state of Illinois. There were people there from Taiwan, the UK, Hawaii, Canada, of course, because it was in Canada, and people from all over the United States. It's a place pretty much where you can go to get assessment information. So it's the one time of the year you can go and speak to people who actually kind of understand what you're saying, that you explain on an everyday basis. Because for the most part, we kind of speak with taxpayers. So taxpayers, you kind of have to explain it to them just in the quick version. They don't get the in-depth version, versus you can go and be around other assessing officers and exchange ideas. There are more than 7,500 members. It was started in 1934. They were actually in Chicago originally, and now they're in Kansas. But this year's attendance, because I actually volunteered at this year's conference to check in most of the people, to kind of get familiar with the organization. There were 1,400 attendees from all over the world who showed up to express different ideas. There were 121 different courses offered during this 3-day period for you to get information from, as far as big box stores, how to value rental properties that are Airbnb, wind farms, you name it, they had something to pretty much kind of tutor you on it. There were 2 that we kind of picked out. This says, where are we now? Kind of going through it fast just because it's kind of really a breakdown. If there's further explanation, I'll be glad to do that at a later date. But as of right now, we've just got to the point to where our real estate transfer declarations and our city permits are actually all electronic. We're still using the cost approach to value properties. Currently, we're working on the market approach. We would like to be able to use more sales comparison, so that was some of the information we picked up while we were gone. To me, what I believe the benefits of the conference are, they introduce you to pretty much new technologies. The old-fashioned way of doing it was to go out to the properties and see whatever you could actually physically see from outside. But there's so much access of information online to where you know what the interior of some of these properties look like now just by typing in the address. Where at first, you kind of just had to guess these things. Garbage in, garbage out. This is actually the one I picked, the one course of all the 121 I thought was the best. And it's literally about data. I'm one of the, if you ever really had a conversation with me about like assessments outside of this, I'm real data driven. The more data you have, the more accurate your data, I feel, the more accurate the assessment. So I'm a real stickler when it comes to data. Well, this model pretty much talked about how a lot of townships were facing issues where the data wasn't kept up. Because the data wasn't kept up, a lot of times the values became skewed. So they had these mass uptick in appeals. So this was just pretty much a seminar telling people why not to have these the bad data instances. It talks a lot about like modeling, and what modeling is it's just building information to know which characteristics derive value and which characteristics do not drive value. Because in some neighborhoods, a fireplace may add $5,000 in value, or a pool may add $10,000 in value, but in another neighborhood, that same pool would be a deterrent to someone trying to buy it. So that may actually negatively impact the particular property. That speaks more about models, and as far as you know, there are 21 neighborhoods in the Cunningham Township as far as they're divided up now. They're not divided by residential, industrial, or commercial. They're just neighborhood 1 through 21 based on old boundaries. Okay, this was actually one that Wayne picked out. The impact of infrequent reassessments on the real estate market. As you can see, we spent a lot of time actually trying to figure out how to correct a lot of data errors. So it talks a lot about reassessments and the challenges that other people were facing. People feel that once you do reassessment, it'll create ghost towns. It'll tax people out of their homes. All of these different things are theories and thoughts people have had over time, but not necessarily always true. In this case, this was actually a county in New York who did a reassessment. It was a new regime. They actually brought in outsiders to do their assessments, and the town pretty much went crazy. It made it all into the news. The newspapers were telling people move to Florida. Literally, that's what the newspaper articles were telling people in this particular area. And as you can see, they did an assessment in 2016. There were 3,209 appeals at the time they did their reassessment. In 2018, there were 2,441 appeals. So, of course, after the reassessment, you can see there's a steady decline in the number of people who are appealing. So people are now becoming informed, at least in my opinion, they're becoming informed of what the assessment roles are actually doing, and it seems to be they're becoming satisfied. This talks more just about the quality of having the information, exposing your data to taxpayers. One of the things we're pushing for is to have a website, because a lot of the phone calls that I've taken were people calling me asking, oh, what year was the house built? Well, you have to wait 5 minutes while I go pull up this screen to check this particular information. And once this is all available online, there's something that you could actually check from your phone without even having to call our office. So I think that would be a benefit, save our time and taxpayers' time.
We're not
online. Where we would like to go into the future. When I first came before the board, I think back in like February or March when I first started here, I was explaining how a lot of the office was paper related. So now all the property record cards are actually digital. If you send an email request in asking for a property record card, within minutes of us seeing it, we can actually send it to you. So that's the plus. We would like to be the leading assessment office for Champaign County. We want to push everybody to, like, not that I'm into save the trees, but let's save the trees. Like, we don't have to use as much paper as we've been using in the past. As it says, more paper-based office to data-driven. The website, these property record cards, let's get more of them online. Statistical direction for sales, which we've talked about, that's more of a market analysis. We would like to do more market analysis instead of cost, because the older a property gets, it kind of gets hard to calculate the depreciation. So now we're playing the guessing game, and we're trying to actually get away from that and be more accurate in our assessments. In conclusion, the best conference I've ever been to, if you want me to be honest. I've probably been to several throughout my years in assessments, And never have I been around a group of more knowledgeable individuals when it comes to property assessments, so willing to help you, so willing to teach you. Because when you're young in an assessment industry, you're kind of the minority. So it's good to have people who've been on your journey guide you through that journey. And also, the problems that we face in our township are problems other townships have already faced. So instead of us trying to reinvent the wheel, let's go ask how they built it. It was kind of more of that concept. And that's pretty much it. Any questions for me? I'm here to answer.
Mary Alice.
So you had talked a bit about new tools, online tools, and I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, well, there's Zillow, right? There's real estate, there's MLS, there's a whole bunch of different, tons of data online. Has anybody built a, I'm going to use it, a web scraping system in which you can grab all that data? To your knowledge, did anybody talk about that?
Not yet.
Uh-huh.
Because now, it's funny when you say that because I've thought that back when I was in Georgia. Like, there has to be one place to find all this information. The problem you meet going to this conference, you'll get to meet all the people who provide the sources. Oh, they don't want to share with each other. They would prefer you have either all CoreLogic service or all Tyler's service.
Sure.
So it's more like vendor related. But there's nowhere that I know of that has all that information in one place.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Jared.
What are the last big obstacles standing in between you guys in moving from cost to market-based?
The last big obstacle is right now we're in the phase of verifying all of our property record cards. I know earlier in the year we were saying we're going to start this whole big data process, so we've actually started it. The obstacle is, truthfully, winter's coming. So there's that, how many can you get in before it gets too cold to be outside? It's that, pretty much that obstacle, but other than that, we're actually moving along fine.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thanks, William.
Oh, well, you've got
Sorry. Sharice, and then Eric.
I noticed in my neighborhood that two gentlemen are walking around and measuring property. So I kind of wanted to get this on the record so that if anybody around, you should have gotten a postcard. Wayne actually came by the house to look at the postcard and make sure the information was correct and all that kind of thing. But I don't want anybody to be afraid. These are two kind gentlemen. If you're not there, they do knock on the door. If you are not there, they just measure and then they move on to the next thing. I think that also is probably an impediment in the sense that these are two men that are trying to measure all of the property, as far as I understand, in Cunningham Township.
Yes.
And that's how many properties?
The ones we're
Approximately.
currently going to do is slightly over 8,000 properties.
Two people.
Yes.
Okay.
I do want to clarify one point.
Okay.
When you said the mailing that we're sending out the postcards, we're actually doing that neighborhood by neighborhood.
Okay.
Because we found if we sent it out to everybody, it may be February before we get to your neighborhood. So we don't want you to forget. So before I get there, at least 2 to 4 weeks prior to us coming to your particular area, we'll then send out the postcard.
Yeah, because they had already come to our house by the time we got the postcard. But well, no, I mean, but it's just my way of trying to get information on more of a bigger scale. That these gentlemen are they're coming to measure your property so that they can it can be more accurately assessed and so on and so forth. And that's it. They have on vest. The vest, unfortunately, do not say tax assessor's office or assessor's office or anything like that. But they have IDs and everything else. And I had a nice conversation with both of them. And it didn't take them but 5 minutes, maybe. So I just want people to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Eric.
When will market-based assessments start arriving at people's homes? And will that happen citywide all at once, or will that happen neighborhood by neighborhood as the market-based assessment is accomplished?
Well, we haven't determined which neighborhoods are going to be the first neighborhoods, but in the beginning, because 2020 is the quiet year for the Cunningham Township. So the neighborhoods that are most out of line are the ones we're actually going to start with the market data on first. And then we'll slowly move into the other neighborhoods over the next 3 years.
Will you give council people a heads up whose constituents are about to get dramatically different assessed values?
Oh, of course, of course. We'll actually come here prior to that because this whole process has been us trying to inform the people that, hey, it's coming, it's coming. It's not something to be afraid of. We want it to be more inclusive. There's an open door policy. Any questions you have, any information you want explained to you, come to the office from 8:30 to 4:30, besides 12 to 1 when we do take lunch. But from 8:30 to 4:30, there's always someone in the office there to answer any questions.
Mary Alice.
Are you able to answer some of the budget questions?
I can try.
So I'm looking at the let's see, do you have this in front of you, by the way? Do you have
Yes.
Yes, okay, so
Just-
page 16, I believe this is assessor's items. There's notes here on the items that are quite high. So the first one is line 6120, which is travel. It says assessor's travel is at 90% for the year, approximately 88.41.
Just to clarify, I think you're looking at the totals.
Yes.
But the cause of the overage is the assessor's budget, and so what William has in front of him is the assessor's portion of that financial report. So you could speak to that, but the parts that's notes is the total town fund and GA fund together. I just did it on the final, just to be clear. He doesn't have page 16 is the short version.
Okay, well, no, I guess my question, I'm just looking at specifically, property tax appeals, audit complete, paid up front. Of course, audit complete is just one time a year, that makes sense. Property tax appeals, that's at 71%. I'm sure that's a timing issue in which, that comes through, twice a year, once a year? I can't remember how frequently it comes through. But is that, I guess what I'm looking for here is that where we would expect to be given the cyclical nature of some of these things? So property tax appeals, is that, and I assume that's the assessor's budget, Danielle? 'Cause-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
right now, I guess we've spent about 2,800. We have about 40,000 budgeted. Is that to be expected? I think Wendy will give you the page that I'm looking at.
Which line?
2210, legal.
Oh. Actually, no, I was like, yeah, we're,
Yeah, so to speak, if you look at the assessor's 20, I'm trying to get on the same page as you are. I can speak to legal. One of the areas, okay, 6210, got it, okay. So one of the areas we're at, we're over on legal. A piece of that is property tax appeals, and that has to do with us appealing the OSF case. And the, generally speaking, we've had a number of cases that have been in play that have had significant legal activity since the first of the year. And so the question is it going to continue like this? Which is a great question. I asked this question too. And the issue primarily, it doesn't have to do, there's some PTAB issues that Fred and William can speak to. Some of it is legacy cases like the, I'll call it the OSF, but it's actually wasn't when it was Presence case. And so essentially we need to monitor that piece carefully. I don't see, what we've done is essentially appealed the Presence case to the Supreme Court. I think that we'll have a wait and see for quite a bit of time before we decide, where we hear whether or not we're going to be moving forward on that case.
So it's not a typical year, so to
It's
speak.
actually the last 2 years, I would hope to say, are not typical years,
Okay.
because last year was a bank buster when it came to our legal because of the Carl case and going to trial.
Right.
Was it worth it? We hope so. And now we're in a different situation. I did sit down in detail and review the OSF case to make a decision, very clear decision about whether or not to move forward with an appeal to the Supreme Court. And after much deliberation, I brought the mayor in on some of those conversations. We decided this really makes sense for us to go ahead and, fight it in court and then take it to the Supreme Court in terms of appeal.
Okay, all right. And then, so yeah, so there's 4 statements here, basically. So I guess the only other one is the training budget. I understand that it's a compilation of multiple budgets here, right? The supervisor, the township, and the assessor's budget. But since we're at 90%, I'm wondering perhaps both of you can speak to whether or not we're going to go over this year on training. Travel, sorry, not training.
Yeah, so most of the training and travel is the assessor's side, so if you go back to the supervisor, Jay, there's almost nothing there. I am hoping, because our conferences are actually coming up, so we have a Housing Action of Illinois conference, and we have a Township Officials of Illinois conference. They're both late fall, so you'll see some budget that come from those opportunities. I will note, though, is that when we assigned, and I asked Wayne this question, we may see a correction in the classification. You'll notice that training is only at 8.7%, but travel is at 88.41%. And when I produced this, I asked for a report to look at the travel, and it includes some registrations, which really should be allocated to training. So what I'd like to do is have the opportunity to kind of audit that and balance it out to see if when we get to the second quarter report, are we at 50% or are we over? And also I'll make sure that it's appropriately classed as training or travel. So if it's mostly travel, you'll see that. But I did note when I looked into that some of that really should have been classified as training, which is why you see that we're under.
All right, thank you, appreciate that.
Mayor?
Yes.
Oh, so does essentially all of the training dollar expenditure, most of that is travel, I'm inferring. And I wonder if those could be, if it would be a clarification to just put those together as training and travel. And
We could in the future. I mean, from a budget perspective, I like to know what's going to hotel and gas
Yeah.
and well, I don't think we've had, I think they drove to Canada, so there wasn't flights still related to that. And then I like to see what goes to the actual registrations. That's my personal preference. I like to see those two separated out.
well, I think we should go according to your oversight of it.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so as Jared said, one more report. This is, we've actually, before you get upset that I've kept you too long, we have continued to delay this report. Alan, if I can ask you to come up and take William's place. We delayed it a few months because we didn't want to give you some long meetings, but it's gotten to the point that we want to make sure that you see the data before it's stale. So we're bringing you a report that was completed in August. We skipped it for September and bringing it to you now. This is about, excuse me,
Was this sent out early?
the housing quality report. It was on
Yes.
the agenda, but it was not sent to you until today digitally. And I have given you printed copies.
So
that are
this is the
from you.
first time the council has seen this report tonight?
Correct. Yeah, it's a presentation, essentially.
Okay.
It's a presentation that I'd like to walk through. I think it requires some explanation and
Because
discussion.
it will require some response from the city, because I do see some things that aren't quite accurate. So I think it
Okay.
would benefit from response from the city as well,
Certainly.
to complete the picture.
Certainly, and, you know, what we've done is, basically, what we began to do, let me pull up the report here real quickly. Can I see your report real quick, and then I'll pass it back. So essentially, what we were looking at, and this was really originally inspired by, maybe that's the wrong term, but an incident that happened last November where there was a property owner that was losing their rental registration. There were a number of participants low-income families that were impacted by that. We saw a deluge of folks in our office who were concerned about facing homelessness. I believe, although it was a little rough, I think, worked very successfully with the city in ensuring folks either were relocated or stayed where they were. And the city was able to get compliance from that property owner on the last day that they, at 4 o'clock, that they could get compliance. As a result, what we started to do is we partnered with the city in having a training at our office to look at how we could better screen for housing quality of our participants. And if there were property issues, because we had heard murmurs from participants, you know, there's water leaking, or my toilets don't work, or we heard various things, but we weren't really, because we're so focused on our programs, we weren't, I felt, doing adequate follow-up on those anecdotal statements. And so we met with the property management staff at the city, who trained us in all of our staff in the process of how we would submit complaints or help participants to submit complaints about properties, with the shared goal of kind of increasing the overall safety and value of the properties. What we then decided to do with Alan Axelrod, as you've met him before, in our office, is now working officially as an intern, was a volunteer when we did our poverty report. And we were looking at we looked at all the housing stock of Urbana and its rental registration grade, which I do understand. As I found out last week, it takes about 10 years to go through the entire housing stock. What we did is we looked at the housing grade as listed on the City of Urbana website, which is the data we have access to. We ran the addresses of our participants, and then we essentially looked at what is the housing quality of our participants. So with this, I'd like to hand it over to Alan to provide a brief presentation on what we found, and then he'll bounce it back to me to talk a little bit about recommendations.
So, point of clarification, am I reading the letter right now, or am I just going through the bullet points?
I think what you should do is just provide a summary. They have the full document, so I don't think it needs to be read, and then we can.
I would just say it would be helpful for the council to have time to read the report. So yes, a summary is appropriate tonight.
Okay. So the short version of the summary is that after reviewing the housing grades, where A, B, C grades corresponds to just varying numbers of violations, and D represents a threat to one's health as listed in the city ordinance, and F is worse, where over half of the Class D rated housing units were inspected in the last 3 years. We had looked at what sort of housing the GA, General Assistance, and at the time HA, homeless assistance or housing assistance participants lived in. We did this by pulling from the data.urbana.illinois.us website, as well as looking at the addresses of our participants. We also then looked at the number of housing units at each address to appropriately weight the pie charts that are in that report to reflect the number of housing units more specifically, rather than the number of rental properties that have these different grades. The short version of what we found is, although there is a 7% increase in the chance of a GA or HA participant to live in Class A housing, there's very low Class A housing in Urbana because, of course, there's some violations. It's not actually a threat to one's health or anything like that. But they were 27% less likely to live in Class B housing. They were 7 times more likely to live in Class C housing, and they were 6 times more likely to live in Class D housing. Now, that is a small number of housing units, so the stat is taken with a grain of salt, but given that there are, in our particular case, 3 participants who are living in Class D housing, that's a significant overrepresentation in the city when there's 9 housing units that are Class D. That's basically the report in a nutshell, as we talk about just why it's important to look at Class D housing and to understand that there might be a relationship between the quality of housing that one has access to and their housing security needs.
Great. So I will just jump to action steps, and this is to start a conversation about how we can work together to essentially ensure affordable, safe housing for all Urbana residents. That's the big picture. We want to work together to improve the quality and the access. As I said, we've already started screening, and in addition, in looking at the rental registration ordinance, and I just make a note that I was actually involved in the current ordinance. It passed when I was on city council, and I take responsibility in part for what I see as some of the unintended consequences of that ordinance, is that it could lead to the forced relocation of tenants whose landlords do not comply with the program, even when those homes are still fit for human habitation. Maybe the landlord's behind on paying rental registration fees or fines, but it's not considered uninhabitable. And we had that happen last November. It's my understanding that there may be future issues like that. And what we'd like to do is really to encourage the city council to be focused on the consumer. So is there a way to look at that ordinance and avoid forcing the residents out of their property, but empower consumers? So these are ideas from our office. You could mail to residents and place signs outside of the property notifying residents of the landlord's lack of compliance with the rental registration and their right to move, offering to provide assistance if they choose so. So I think it would be useful to look at how do we create consumer choice in this situation, and give folks the time that they need, especially if they're on subsidized housing. It can take up to 3 months to move, so a 30-day notification would not work. I think the mark of a successful economic system is when needs and offers or supply and demand are matched in an efficient, effective way. I would say that housing in Urbana fails to meet that benchmark, as it does across the country. It's not special to Urbana. The city of Urbana has an estimated vacant rental stock of 1,103 units. You can see that came from the American Community Survey 5-year estimates of 2017. That amount is more than enough to house the number of known homeless households in Urbana. So we have a problem with needs and offers. We have an excess that's not being met. We have people deprived of a basic fundamental human need. So I note that in 2017, 365 Urbana households were taken to court for eviction. That's 1 per calendar day. Our rental assistance program serves approximately 144 households per month, so we're averaging about 12. So you can look at those numbers and say, how do we better efficiently match this resource and this housing stock with the needs that are happening in the community? I really encourage us to work together to engage with the data and the property management community to understand the vacancy data and resolve it in a way that can provide safe and stable housing. Now, one of the biggest areas, and the Housing Authority had an affordable housing summit. You may have read about it in the paper. There were a number of representatives at the table, including our congressman and our state representative. At that time, one of the key outcomes is how do we provide more subsidized housing and more affordable, truly affordable housing in the community. And what I think it's important to look at is affordability really should be based on what people can pay, not some federal definition of affordability that really doesn't take into consideration our market space. So we have a lot of tax credits, as you might have seen in the paper, in some cases going straight up to kind of high-end student housing, but we also have situations where tax credits basically are subsidizing market rate rents. And so how do we create another layer of subsidized housing on top of that? Now, I will say that the Housing Authority, if we're able to increase vouchers, and we certainly, as you can see if you watch the online report, the Housing Authority has over 2 years in its savings account. It doesn't have to bring in income for 2 years and could spend. That's, I think, more than a reasonable amount of money to have on hands, and I would encourage the city to encourage the Housing Authority to use its surplus to increase the number of vouchers available to families in Urbana. I'll also note that when the Housing Authority does do tenant-based vouchers, meaning housing choice vouchers used to be called Section 8, where you could take it and port it to the place of your choice, you have to pass an inspection. The landlord passes an inspection. So essentially and if it doesn't pass the inspection, even after a family moves in, then that HUD payment can be revoked. So I think that it really helps to increase the quality of the housing and ensure that landlords kind of hold the line on the conditions of their property to be having housing choice vouchers circulate. So it's kind of an added tool with our rental registration program and ensuring quality housing, especially for low-income families. I also think we should talk about creative ways to fund subsidies through surplus generated by business investments. Can we look at using properties that we purchase and using the market rates to subsidize a certain number of units? So we actually look at how do we use the market as it currently exists to try to reallocate funds to create more subsidized housing. And I would lastly say, although it is illegal to discriminate against subsidized housing vouchers within the city of Urbana, this practice does continue. And as of September, 91 households with housing choice vouchers were actively looking for housing throughout the county and could not find it. Right? It's a very high number. And it's because, as I've asked many times at the Housing Authority, it's because of barriers to people accessing housing. The landlords don't want to play ball. They don't want to work with, those people. There's a number of reasons that are there. The city of Urbana and the township can inform property owners and the public about their rights. So you, as a city council, do an annual registration mailing. Can you include easy to parse understanding of the Human Rights Ordinance and the Urbana Landlord Tenant Ordinance? I do know that you have the tenant ordinance in summary, but the Human Rights Ordinance is not there. So I would say, in particular, the kinds of discrimination we see most is around race, number of children, and criminal justice background. And I would say student status. Some people straight up ask, are you a student or not? And you're not supposed to screen based on student status. The fact that landlords are limited to collecting 5% of the monthly fee and late fees, the monthly rent and late fees, we regularly see landlords that violate this. Excuse me. So, my voice has run out, as have my time. Any questions?
Bill?
What's the main obstacle for the Housing Authority to expand number of vouchers? If they have that money saved, what seems to be the obstacle?
Great question. This is the question I asked after our audit when I saw how much cash was on hand. I would encourage the city to have a presentation by the Housing Authority, as the city of Champaign does annually, to the council, where you can ask that question. But when I asked that question, I was told it was because there's certain regulations around how many housing vouchers can be released if you have a certain number circulating. So it's like you can't pull money for vouchers and put more vouchers on the street if you have so many people looking. I believe there's other aspects to it, but that was the primary aspect, you want to make sure that folks can qualify to get access to the vouchers and to the project-based RAD properties. So we were seeing landlords with such high qualifications that we regularly have vacancies in properties that we are paying HAP payments to. So there's actually empty buildings throughout the county that the Housing Authority is paying monthly for an empty space because the tenant selection criteria is high in part, and there may be other reasons we should dig into. So I think that we need to look at how do we, clean that pipe to get get it flowing faster so that we can actually use some of that surplus to house people.
Okay. Sharice, and then I want to ask Carol to clarify one point that's made here. Go ahead.
Is there anyone on staff who actually can go, who goes to check to make sure that there is no discrimination? I mean, is there any,
Testers, you mean? Someone
Yeah.
who would test?
is there some, I mean, to be paying money to for an empty space,
Oh, I see.
is there any inspection, anybody that, on the housing authority staff or on your staff or anybody that goes, that says, or some kind of appeal that, where a person who's got a voucher can go to discuss or to serve an owner that refuses to
rent to them?
Yeah, rent to them because of they have a voucher. Is there any kind of
There
process?
is, there is an appeals process. I think the larger issue is putting the onus on low-income families. You oftentimes don't see them take advantage of that. And I think having an approach that is more like a testing approach would make sense. I don't think that happens at the level of the housing authority. It doesn't happen in the city of Urbana or in the township.
So there's no advocate for those that get turned down because they have vouchers or those that are discriminated against. There's no advocate on anyone's payroll to speak for people.
Well, the city has a human relations commission and a human rights officer, and anyone who experiences discrimination in the city of Urbana is strongly encouraged to submit a complaint to the human relations officer, rights officer, whether they have housing subsidies or not. The issue is whether or not, how often we get complaints. And what we know is that discrimination is happening. We're not getting a whole lot of complaints. And I think it would be useful to look at what can we do to be more proactive. If you look at the ordinance, and I encourage you to look at the human relations ordinance,
Okay.
human rights ordinance, it actually says that the charge of the commission is to do a lot of outreach and education. I know that they do some, but I think as a council you should reread that ordinance, because when I reread it when I became supervisor, I had forgotten a lot of the pieces that had to do with the outreach and education components of that office and that commission.
I just wanted to ask Carol to comment, provide a little more information on the events of last November.
Yes.
Just so you're.
Yeah, I
understanding.
just want to clarify for the record that when that situation was unfolding, we were in pretty constant contact with the tenants who were involved, and they were getting some conflicting information, but at no time were they in danger of being precipitously forced out of their housing. So what I do agree that we could more artfully use that tool, and we shall in the future. But I just want to make sure people understand that we were managing the situation pretty carefully at the time.
And if they had to have left for any reason, not of their own fault, we would have provided, the city has funds to provide assistance for moving as well. And we have met since then with the township, in fact, just recently to talk about process going forward. So I think in the interest of time, thank you very much for this report. If we need to continue the conversation next month, we will. It's a lot to take in, just receiving it tonight. Eric?
It looked to me as though we had an OSF item on the agenda that we skipped over.
Yes.
Holy moly, you're right. Okay.
Diane?
Yes.
Danielle, would you mind resending the electronic copy, because I don't see it in my email?
The electronic copy of the housing
report.
report? Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I sent it this afternoon. I will.
Okay.
Maybe
Maybe
it
I,
was sent this afternoon.
I did.
no, I don't think anybody.
None of us received it.
Okay. Well, that is interesting.
Okay, so we look forward to getting that.
Yep.
There's no unfinished business. Under new business, we have resolution number T 2019-10-017R, which is a resolution authorizing intervention in assessment complaint of OSF Healthcare System, and it sounds like it would be Fred Grosser.
As you probably know, OSF Healthcare Systems last year purchased the hospital property. It's been known by many names, once Mercy, Covenant, Pravina, Presence, all under the same ownership. what they have done, they've been involved in various things trying to get exempt status, although their paperwork shows that their charity care is 0.7%, 0.7%. The latest thing they have done is filed a complaint with the Champaign County Board of Review asserting that their property actually has zero value. And that's what we propose to participate in so that we can ask questions of the appraiser, if they can come up with one who will say that the 51 parcels that are in Urbana total zero. Of course, their idea is that zero value equals exemption, but the Illinois Appellate Court has said that that's a misnomer and not correct. Valuation and exempt status are totally different things. And we are asking here just for authority to proceed with this. It's not a direction. We don't know what the situation is going to be tomorrow, but we want to do this as soon as we learned of their assessment complaint.
Any questions for Fred? Is there a motion?
I move approval of this resolution.
Second?
I'll second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Mary Alice. Any discussion? Bill?
Just clarification, do they have an assessed value now?
Yes, I don't know offhand what it is, but
Okay.
there is a value on it.
Okay.
It's
But
probably the same value that was on it before they bought it.
Okay. And they want to make it zero?
They want to make it zero.
Okay, thanks.
Jared, did you have a question? I saw you. No. Okay. Any other? Okay. Does this require a
Roll call.
roll call? Will all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes.
Does it, do you want a roll call?
Roll call vote.
I'm sorry, and I heard, boy, okay, sorry. Clean up my ears. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown,
Yes?
Hayson,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Roberts, Wu,
Yes.
That motion passes. And with no further business before the town board, this meeting is adjourned.